Are there qualities we know we don't want in the next manager of the Cincinnati Reds? Are there names on the list we know aren't the right fit? We're going to discuss on today's live Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have a combined 12 years of a podcasting experience about these Red Legs. And we want to thank you for joining us here on the Locked On Reds podcast that is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Cincinnati Reds, every single day. We will be talking about these Reds as the season ends, as we get into the offseason, every single day. So make sure you subscribe to get at least 30 minutes of Reds talk in your feed each and every day. And on today's podcast, we are going to maybe come to a consensus, or maybe not a consensus, but we're going to nail down a couple of guys that maybe we would prefer the Reds to hire for their next manager. That'll be a little bit later on in today's show. Jonathan India has more things to say, and quite frankly, a lot of the players are saying lots of things about what the future of this team should hold. We'll discuss that here in just a few minutes, but we want to start first with this idea of who the next manager should be and who we do not want it to be. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast, this live podcast, which getting started a little bit later than we had planned. That's my fault because I decided to go driving during a hurricane and thought that I would have normal travel time. So, whatever. Anyway, we're here and we're ready to go. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com or download the Booking.com app today. And where we will begin today, Steve, is we've been talking about candidates that we like. Let's talk about candidates, or I'm going to actually start with a group of candidates that I don't want. I don't necessarily know that I have specific outside guys that I'm not interested in for the Reds organization, but I know this. I do not want the next Reds manager to be somebody in-house right now. I think that there have been current failures on the roster and failures to lead the current roster, and I don't think that was one man's fault. In fact, the Reds have already let go of Jeff Pickler. They're considering other guys and what they look like moving forward. And I know that Freddie Benavides is in the interviewing process. I know that there are minor league coaches in the interviewing process. And maybe I even include Barry Larkin in this, because I think that who is in-house right now did not help the situation. So why will they help the situation next year?
Probably a good take, Jeff. I don't feel like anybody that's currently a coach. I'll put that. I think Barry Larkin's probably in the conversation if he wants to be in the conversation, at least from an interviewing standpoint. And if you go through an interview with Barry Larkin, I'm not sure how you do that and you don't hire him. But that being said, Freddie Benavides is a great guy. I think that he's brought a lot to this team. I think he was kind of a studying guy in the dugout there. And did your power just flash there, my friend?
Yes, it did. Am I still
right,
on?
I still got you. So let's just keep rolling. And if Jeff disappears, well, we'll wing it, folks. Look, I think Freddie's great. And I think that he was probably a very studying, guiding force in this particular coaching staff. That being said, he's not the right fit to move this team in a completely different direction. It's hard to say, here's what I'll do to make the team better. My question is, why weren't you doing it all along? This was not a coaching staff where David Bell was the end all be all, iron-fisted ruler of what was done. Everybody had a say, everybody had a role. So if Freddie felt like things were undisciplined and Freddie felt like guys weren't being held accountable, why didn't he discipline them? Why didn't he hold them accountable? I don't see how he comes in and makes anything different. I think it's fair to give him an interview. I think it's fair that he's the interim manager. I think that was the right pick. But beyond that, I don't think he's the guy you want to hire. As far as the minor league coaches go, though, I'll entertain the idea of them interviewing Pat Kelly and see where it goes. I'm not sure at this point in his career he's the guy that suddenly finds his way into a major league job, but I think he's definitely earned the right to be talked to. I think he's definitely earned the right to come up to Cincinnati and sit down with Nick Krall and the committee, whatever that may look like, and have an opportunity to plead his case. And who knows, maybe he comes in and is an amazing interview and says all the right things and knows most of these players already and knocks everybody's socks off. I think he deserves that chance. But by and large, I think the next manager has to come from outside the organization.
Yeah, and the main reason that I take this is that if they move on from David Bell, but they just hire one of his lieutenants, then what really changes? Where was it really just, some sort of distraction, dangle the shiny thing in front of Reds country and say, look, we're doing things, and then they don't do anything? Like, I feel like this has to be a decision, has to be somebody that comes from outside of the organization. And I talked about Buck Showalter on yesterday's episode without you a little bit, and he's a guy that I would like to discuss. And I think that there is just as many questions about whether or not he would actually take the job as there is if he is the right candidate for the job. Terry Francona, there are whispers, I wouldn't even call them rumors yet, but there are whispers that he may actually be looking to get back into managing. Guys like that. Like, I kind of think I'm starting to lean more toward somebody who has more experience, somebody who has seen lots of different things, and obviously the quality of accountability and things like that. But I think that the outside voice is probably the most important thing for me, because we need a fresh set of eyes on this roster. We need a fresh understanding of how to win baseball games coming into this organization, because this team has had pretty much, outside of a few coaching changes here or there, that's had the same coaching staff and the same leadership now for about 6 years. So I really think we need a different voice, and that is what will make this move that, we can talk about how it was strangely timed and whether or not this moves the needle as much as saying that getting an outfielder will move the needle. But the way that you make sure that you turn this into a superfluous decision is that you hire somebody who is already in-house.
Yeah, I think that if you're making these moves and you're trying to regain some credibility in the fan base, you torpedo that the second it's Mr. Inside Hire. The second that you elevate Benavides, remove his interim tag, what have you. And honestly, I think that holds true for Derek Johnson as well. I mean, as much as I like a lot of what DJ has done as the pitching coach and the director of pitching for the entire organization, I don't want to see him elevated to head coach, because again, I think it's more of the same. Why didn't you speak up during this 2024 debacle? Right. I don't think you get to be considered. So I don't know, Jeff. And I mean, when we're looking at the outside hires, are there guys outside that we know we don't want, that we know we don't think are a good fit? I don't know per se, other than
I've heard Scott Service's name thrown around. I don't necessarily know that I'm certain that I don't think that I'm like in love with the idea of hiring him, but I also don't think that I hate the idea of hiring him. He wouldn't be high up on my list, though.
I think Mr. Outside Hire, the tendency when you make a coaching change, when you make a change in manager, is to go the total opposite of what you were doing, because whatever you were doing wasn't working. And I don't think that's the right answer. We talked about this last week, Jeff. When the Reds brought in Kyle Bodie and went total analytics and did all the things they did in the minor leagues, the Reds had to make a course correction along the way, and they parted ways with Kyle Bodie. And while they did move back from analytics and brought back some of the old school coaching guys that manage with their eyes and their guts and look at the player that's in front of them, they didn't go all the way the other way with that. They found a happy medium. And I think that's what's been lacking in this dugout. I think that's what's been lacking in how the Reds are doing things as far as lineup construction and who's in charge and all of those things. So for me, whoever you go get, Mr. Outside Hire, can't be Jim Riggleman. It can't be the guy that's going to come in and be like, I don't need a newfangled computer to tell me. It needs to be somebody that can use the analytics and the computer and the data that's available, but also incorporate some of what Dusty Baker brought to the table and be able to look at a guy and get a gut feeling and know that his hand is hot, and analytics be damned, that guy's going to start the next 5 days. You need that guy that's somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder, like, are we talking ourselves out of Skip Schumacher? I know he's the betting favorite.
No, I'm not talking myself out of Schumacher, because I think he is that middle of the road guy. I think he's young enough and been in the game recently enough to know the benefits of what the computer has to say and what you can gain by looking at that scouting report and what you can gain by looking at the numbers. But he's also a guy that, again, not very far removed from playing the game, knows how to look at that guy that, oh, he's about to go on a heater. You can just tell, he has both of those worlds. David Ross has both of those worlds. I think what I'm saying, Jeff, is the next outside hire, maybe it's time to move to the next generation of baseball manager. Maybe it's time to move away. As much as it would be great to get Francona, and I'm not sure he's willing to come back and manage again, that might not be the right direction. That might be a bit of an overcorrection. Maybe, I'm not sure, but there are guys out there that are too old school, I think. And so I think now that a lot of the names we're throwing around, Jeff, are guys that were players in the 1990s and closer to us in time. I think we don't need to be going back farther than that. I think the game has changed. I think those guys are, a little bit older, a little bit more tired, and may not be willing and may not have the energy to take on this very, 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 very young Reds team.
So are you saying Luke Maile?
Stop it.
I'm just kidding. I saw that Mark Sheldon included that in his article, but he also, I saw he just released another one that he said that Luke Maile is definitively not in the running. And I was like, good.
All right. Last point then, before we get out of this segment, Jeff, is then that the next manager should also have managerial experience. So it needs to be somebody that can connect with the computers, can connect with the players, and has done it before somewhere at some level.
I want to definitely dive into this conversation a little bit more, because I think maybe we are talking ourselves out of Barry Larkin on this one. But I definitely want to dive into that here a little bit later on. But next, there's been a lot of players talking, and quite frankly, I'm very appreciative of the fact that they've been talking, but they've been saying some interesting things on their plans, or what their hope the plan is for the future. We will discuss that coming up next.
With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
We are talking Cincinnati Reds baseball here today, every day, every week, every month, all year long. Make sure that you subscribe, because we will give you at least 30 minutes of Reds talk every single day in your feed all year long. And we're talking about the manager spot. We're talking about the future of this ball club, especially with the fact that it seems that they are so close. They are so close to being a competitive contention team. They just need a couple of things this offseason, and they need the right guy leading them. And there's definitely been a lot of players giving some quotes, giving their thoughts on what the next steps should be. Nobody's giving that a name. Nobody's been like, I want this guy or I want that guy, but they know the qualities that they want, and they know what they want pushed in the clubhouse. And I know Jonathan India has been very vocal about this, Tyler Stevenson, Ellie De La Cruz, but there's definitely been a lot of stuff that they've been saying.
Yeah, Jonathan India in particular has said some things over the last several days, things that we've talked about a little bit in one of our shows, but I just keep thinking about it. And for him to say it's the same here every year, to basically call out Nick Krall. That's what he did. He called out Nick.
Damning. Yeah, it's damning.
He did. He called him out. There's things we need. It's the same every year. This is a team that just constantly battles for 500 and hopes, uses that hope as a strategy to sneak on in, hashtag. I'm tired of that. I'm done with that. And it's really refreshing to hear these players step up and say that they are also done with that. And they want the front office to act and go get them the help that they need to not be a 500 ball club, but a division winning ball club.
Let me ask you this. I've seen, and quite frankly, it's obvious, and I'm glad that they're all saying this, but I've seen a lot of players really harp on the accountability factor. This team needs more accountability. There's been some players go into detail, like, there's guys that maybe don't show up on time or maybe aren't getting in early, getting the work in, taking it seriously. I've had some thoughts, and I've seen some folks that have wondered this. Are they all talking around the bush and saying that, they think that Elly De La Cruz is getting away with some stuff?
Well, I'm not ready to point a finger at Elly De La Cruz.
I'm not either.
Because and none of them are ever going to say who it is that they're talking about.
No.
However, they are calling out somebody. They are throwing down a bit of a gauntlet. So I don't know. I don't know if it's Elly. I mean, I guess it makes sense that you would start there in speculating who it is that they're talking about. I don't want to do that. I think we throw enough shade at Elly De La Cruz unnecessarily for me to be willing to just be like, oh, they're talking about Elly. But they are clearly talking about somebody. And I think it's good that they're doing it now, because the expectation is going to be this new manager comes in. And I think whoever it is that's been dogging it, whether the new manager is willing to 100% get in everybody's face right away, the veterans of this team are clearly establishing themselves in a role where from day one of the new management, they're going to be like, that stuff isn't going to fly and you're not going to do that anymore. And we've very nicely called you out. We will call you out more publicly.
I'm interested too, because, and I know that I think it's like a rule that you're not allowed to talk to players on the injured list, but I would love to know what Jamer Candelario thinks about all this, because he is here for the next couple of years, guaranteed on his contract. It's not a will he or won't he deal. It's he is under team control for 2 more seasons. So I wonder what he thinks about this. I know that Elly has spoken, and I've seen some quotes from him that are, Elly has given us more of the player speak, where India and Stevenson have been a little bit more candid with their thoughts and things like that. I don't think that Elly is who they're referring to. We've heard a lot of reports that he is a hard worker. So I don't think that that's the guy, but I do wonder if it's somebody that might move the needle a little bit, might be a guy that we're like, whoa, that's the guy. Because David Bell fostered a feeling of comfortability. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of guys that were like, man, we were so comfortable under him. Or, there were reporters that was just like the clubhouse is so comfortable and, comfort. But comfort doesn't win ball games. Like, I think that there is too much of a laid back feeling. And that is really how the Reds need to move with this next guy. And that's what these guys are saying. I'd be kind of curious to know. That's been on the top of my mind, like seeing some of these comments and stuff. But I do think that, kind of going back to your earlier point, looking at a guy who has played here recently and who has an understanding of the modern game a little bit more so, and not trying to adapt to the modern game, but that's just what they are used to, really would go a long way with guys like that.
Yeah. And I saw some comments, and, I'm not going to call out the people that posted them. Not in that business, but I saw some comments on X today that basically were along the lines of, you don't go get a manager that calls out guys and embarrasses them publicly and does all of these things that's just to appease the fans and the media and give them something to write about and all this kind of talk. And, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about hiring a manager that's going to come in here and every single day after a game, win or lose, come out and be like, oh yeah, well, this guy played like crap and this guy didn't do what we needed him to do. And, he gave up a home run in the 5th and he's terrible. That's not what we're talking about. But what we are talking about, I think, Jeff, is that we need a manager that will answer direct questions directly. And that has been sorely lacking around here for at least the last 6 seasons. So for me, if a guy gets called out in the course of answering a direct question, so be it. That clip we played from Skip Schumacher last week, where he called out Sixto Sanchez pretty hard. You can't take that in a vacuum. That was, if you listen closely to the quote, That wasn't the first game that Sixto had given up 4 runs to start a game. That wasn't the first time that Skip Schumacher was asked about their performance. And the direct question he was asked is, what is going on with Sixto? Why is he having these troubles? What is the problem? And the answer was, I don't know. But I've had to let him know that what he's doing is unacceptable at this level. If he wants to remain a big league pitcher, then he's got to get better. Those are the things. That's a direct answer to a direct question that was asked about a specific player. It wasn't an uninvited call out of somebody just for the sake of calling out somebody. So it's a fine line. And I think that's why it's important that we get into a more recent generation of baseball player that is converted over to manager, because they're going to know how to walk that line a little bit. It's not completely old school. It's not completely new school. It's somewhere in the middle to hold guys accountable.
And he was fair with what he said. I didn't think that he was unnecessarily going like above and beyond, like, calling out certain things that were unfair to Sixto Sanchez. The other part of that is, yes, it was a press conference where he's talking about a performance that he didn't like. And no, that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for a guy that calls people out in press conferences, but that is the example that we have. We don't have video of him in the clubhouse talking to players or during batting practice or what have you, because that stuff doesn't exist. There's no video like that. But the idea is that every time David Bell was asked about certain inefficiencies and performances, he never said anything to the effect of, like that, we just can't have that. We got to figure out a way to fix that. It was, no, we're close. We're going to turn the corner. We're almost there. Or this guy's not that far off. Like it was just speaking to us like we were a child and we did not understand baseball. And so there's that element, but the other element was things never got better on the field. So that's what we're looking for here, is that if there are mistakes early on in April, we don't see those mistakes in May, June, July, or, even into September, where that's what happened this year. We saw problems in April that continued all the way through September. And that is how they have got to get a new guy in here that is going to just stop all that and get these guys to focus, because this roster is far too talented to be missing the playoffs like it is.
All right, gang, you have heard from us. Those of you that are live with us here on YouTube, it is time for us to hear from you. So coming up, we are going to get into your questions and comments. The chat has been very, very active. We're going to dig into all of your thoughts and all of your questions coming up after this. This episode of Locked On Reds is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball playoffs, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you have always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find the perfect stay, even in your baseball rival's city. Say you're heading to follow the playoffs and you're going to New York or Boston, Booking.com has you covered. For hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB playoff season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city. We've talked about this during the season. If you're following the Reds around, go to St. Louis, go to Chicago. You're not going to be disappointed. To get started, download the Booking.com app or visit Booking.com today. The best way to enhance your baseball watching experience was with Prize Picks, America's #1 daily sports fantasy app. It's so easy to see why they're the best, because you can win up to 100 times your money with Prize Picks. All you need is as little as 4 correct picks in an entry, and you can turn your $10 into $1,000. All you need to do is pick your favorite players like Ellie De La Cruz or Tyler Stevenson, and pick more if you think Ellie's going to steal more bases. Take Tyler Stevenson for more hits, or not more steals. But with Ellie, you're going to get more steals. Just find your favorite stats and click more or click less. To get started, download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed, which really helps out Jeff Carr on some of his picks. Get Prize Picks today. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, this is going to be our last show of the regular season. We're going to be back with you next week in off-season mode, where we're going to start breaking down 2024 and looking ahead to 2025. So make sure you have clicked like, make sure you have clicked subscribe, click that notification bell here on YouTube so you know when we go live, when we drop extra episodes, etc. You can also take us with you on the go in the audio feeds. We are available everywhere you get your podcasts. All right, Jeff, it is time to get into the questions and the comments. People have lots of things to say. They've been talking all along. Listen, guys, you've been very active today. So everything you've put in so far, if you've got a question you want us to get to, put it in again, because it'll be easier than just circling back. One of the things that kind of caught my eye when we were talking there, Jeff, is people debating whether or not Larkin is really an inside hire. Is he really to be lumped in with everybody else or not? And I don't think that he is. I think we did a good job of addressing that. I will say this. Larkin has worked with these players a lot more than I think people realize. Larkin has spent a lot of years now, not only at spring training, but prior to being in the broadcast booth. He did a lot of traveling to the minor league team sites themselves, and he still does that on occasion. He doesn't do it as much as he used to now that he's doing the broadcasts for the home games. But every spring training, Barry Larkin and Eric Davis can be found working with young players, trying to help bring them along. Most recently, Eric Davis was working with Jonathan India, trying to get him comfortable in the outfield in order to, let Jonathan be a super utility before everything blew up, and that plan never really happened. So I don't think Larkin should be considered part of the, we don't want any inside hire. I touched on this a little bit, Jeff. If you interview Barry Larkin, if he agrees to be interviewed, if he agrees to put his hat in this thing, I think you have a very, very hard time not hiring him. I think at that point, if it comes out that Barry Larkin has sat down with Nick Krall and the interview committee and actually had a formal interview for manager of the Cincinnati Reds, I don't see a world where they don't hire him.
I find it intriguing because I was looking at Mark Sheldon's article on MLB.com where he got the chance. He sat down with Nick Krall and was talking to him about the process and where they are at. And Nick Krall said this. He said, "We're getting home on Monday and we'll try to start setting things up." I was told in the press conference this past Monday that they were going to be interviewing people while they were on the road. Apparently that hasn't happened. So we are not closer to getting any sort of resolution on this. Very strange, again, that they fired him with a week left in the season and they didn't do anything this week. They're just going to start setting things up next Monday. But when I think about Larkin, I would agree he's not necessarily an in-house guy because he has voiced his displeasure with certain decisions and he has voiced his opinion on the broadcast and things like that definitely differ from what the current regime really had going for it. But I think that for me, if I were setting up a wish list, I think he would probably not be at the end of it, not saying that he is the lowest candidate that I would want, but if you go past where we're talking about with Barry Larkin, because Barry Larkin does not have the experience that we're kind of hoping for, we would have to make a concession with that qualification. And while I don't think that is a non-starter, I do think that you have to explain that in some other way. Who is coming with him? Who is going to be part of his staff with him? We know that Derek Johnson is going to be part of the staff come rain or shine because Nick Krall said as much. So I think that there's definitely going to be some more with that from a baseball standpoint. There's going to be fans that love that if Barry Larkin were to get that job. I've also seen a number of fans in the comment sections and on X that have said they're not interested in all in Barry Larkin being the manager. So it's going to be a very interesting decision how they move forward with that. But I think that there is a new set of eyes, a new mind, a new voice that this team needs. And while Barry would be a new voice, he is still very close to this team. And I don't know. I think I still would prefer somebody from the outside before Barry were to be the guy.
Kerry checks in and says, so eating David Bell's contract, pay for a new manager contract, any money left to spend, or this will be management's excuse not to spend. Also, when will we know about the Bally's sports situation? Okay, a lot of things to unpack here. First of all, whatever David Bell's contract was in the eating of it, whatever the new manager is going to cost, there is simply more money than that. This is not these are not things that will prevent the Reds from going out and signing a free agent outfield bat, as an example. The Castellinis may try and say that it is, and if they do, they're looking in a camera and lying to you. There is plenty of money for them to do this and the things that need to be done. If they choose to use this as an excuse, if they choose to say, we've lost so much money in these things over here, we just can't really go get that bat, then they're bold-faced liars. I'm just going to say it.
I was looking at this because I wrote an article for CincinnatiRedstock.com. By the way, you should bookmark that website if you haven't already. About what Spot Track, which is the source on the internet, they do a really good job of breaking down player contracts, team payrolls, and things like that. They have estimated what arbitration, what picking up the options, all this other stuff. If the Reds, if every player option was to be picked up, and if the Reds picked up every club option / mutual option, whatever, and including what is estimated for arbitration, the Reds have $70 million in change on the books this offseason. The league average payroll for last year was $166 million. And now you're probably saying, well, the Reds have always said they're never going to be a league average payroll and all this other stuff. Fine. They should be, because they should be worried about winning playoff games. But I do concede to you that that's not always the case. So let's look at another case. That Kansas City Royals had a $131 million payroll this past year. Being that the Reds will be at 70 this offseason, they should have money to spend. And while Spot Track does not have the information on manager and coach salaries, I cannot imagine that would be adding another $60 million to the Reds' payroll. So I believe that they have room to move and room to go get the big guys. And maybe it's not Juan Soto. Maybe I am having a little bit of a pipe dream over here, but they should have money to get Santander. They should have money to go get some legit bullpen arms and maybe even one other legit outfielder. And then we were cooking with gas. But there's no excuses here. This is not something that we can look at and say, well, we're waiting on guys to get better. They're here. The core is here. We're waiting on, this. No, we're not waiting anymore. We've done too much waiting. It is time to go. It is time to invest. And if the Reds do not invest this offseason, there's going to be a lot of hard questions levied at every part of this organization.
Josh checks in and says the new manager has to be the symbol of the culture change. Has to be proof that there's going to be that accountability and that something is going to be different this time. And I think that's the thing, different.
Yeah.
That's what we're all looking for. We're looking for a different in the fire. We're looking for a different in holding players accountable. I don't know what the proof of that looks like other than the eye test. I mean, in the example of Schumacher, we found some examples of him holding players accountable and doing so publicly. I think the proof is going to be in the win-loss record. I think the proof is going to be in the play on the field, discipline on the base paths, the ability to field your position, the ability to get better, guys working hard to improve their defense, guys working hard to do things that have been problems. I think the way we're going to find out if a guy is better or not is when we see those things.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And again, I kind of fall back on, would the Reds be able to get him? I'm not necessarily sure, but this clip encapsulates different. I played this clip on yesterday's podcast when I was talking about Buck Showalter, but this is the feeling that I want from whoever the Reds hire.
I don't, my mind doesn't go there. I just, I know what our job description is. Be one of the teams that gets a chance to roll the dice in October, and that's still a possibility. So that's what we're going after.
That's it. And that was the answer to a question somebody asked him. They were like, outside of making the playoffs, what does success look like for this team this year? And he was like, there is nothing besides that. Like, success is getting to the playoffs, period, plain and simple. And that's what we need for the next manager of this team.
Bobby checks in, wants to move off of the manager talk for a minute, and let's do that. Bobby says, would you expect to see a big blockbuster trade this offseason? I feel like the Reds could trade some of their minor league talent, guys like Chase Petty, Cam Collier, Stewart, etc., for a big name guy. We've talked about multiple outfielders being needed, Jeff, and getting one of those guys via free agency Could they go trade for a big outfielder? And is there somebody early now for us to speculate about this, but is there somebody out there that might be available that you would put a package together that would include names like Chase Petty or Cam Collier in order to bring in a big outfielder to be the second big outfield acquisition of the offseason?
I do think we need to qualify what a big outfielder is. I would say a guy that is good at fielding his position, but also good at hitting at his position as well. There's got to be a little bit of that, because as I have looked more and more at Brent Rooker, since I really got on the Brent Rooker train, he is more of a DH. He's not more of an outfielder like I would want him to be, like I think this team needs. So it'd be kind of hard to have him as this guy. Plus, there are a lot of rumors going around that the A's are basically closing up shop on any trade talk for Brent Rooker. So they're basically saying, you better throw a whole bunch of stuff our way or we're not even interested. So he might be too expensive. But yeah, I think there should be, because this offseason the Reds need to be creative with how they move this roster around. There's definitely some guys that it feels like there's not a whole lot of space to like figure out who's playing here and there and everywhere. And of course, injuries do help figure that part of the equation out through spring training. But even just on paper, looking at this, the outfield is super deficient. And quite frankly, the best version of this team, in my opinion, is Spencer Steer at first base, not in left field. So I would like to see them move accordingly with that. And probably the best way to do that is to sign one, trade one, because we just know. I mean, we're asking a lot of this organization to even sign one. To think that they're going to go out and sign twos, probably.
Well, especially if we want them to also maybe go get a fifth starting pitcher, and maybe if
Right.
we want them to add to this bullpen the big free agent signings could include one big outfielder, Santander as an example, and then you go get that pitchers, you go get the relievers, you go get the starters.
But I know this, the answer to that question from the organization's perspective cannot be no. All options must be on the table and everything must be considered here.
Right. And Nick Krall has demonstrated that he at least understands value in trades. So if one of those or two of those guys have to be traded, I would think he would get a good return. That's just my speculation there. Chris says, how are the Reds going to address the terrible batting averages? 261 average isn't going to get you into the playoffs either. I'm old enough to remember the Big Red Machine. The batting average problem, the offensive production problem, it's not a Reds problem. It is a Major League Baseball problem. And I'm interested to see how Major League Baseball addresses what's going on. There's a lot of clamoring out there that Major League Baseball is leaning in the direction of it's time to maybe adjust the mound again. It's time to do some things to make it easier for the hitters. It's going to be very interesting. This could be a problem that doesn't get fixed until the next collective bargaining agreement, where lots of things are going to maybe get fixed. But this is not a Reds problem. This is a baseball problem.
Yeah, the average, last time I saw it, the league average batting average is 240. It's not as if there are a ton of guys that are just hitting so much better than the Reds. And while the Reds are a little bit low on the list as far as batting average goes, they're not like egregiously low as if they can't hit the ball at all. They're pretty much close to league average. So I would definitely like to see some better batting average guys in here, but we need more power. This team does not have enough power, at least on a consistent basis. So that should be kind of where you start to look at. And then you kind of hope that TJ Friedel maintains his health. He'll help out the team batting average next year. And I think that Ellie De La Cruz's batting average will tick up a little bit as he gets a little bit better at understanding, what pitches are his to hit and what aren't. And then Matt McClain returning, which I did see there was a good update on him, that he is looking very strong and ready to go for the Arizona Fall League. With him returning, you can figure that his batting average is going to help out this team as well. Like there was a long period of time where the Reds were putting into the lineup the April version of Santiago Espinal, which was not very good, the April version of Jamer Candelario, which was not very good, and the 2024 version of Will Benson, which was not good at all. And that is really where the batting average got torpedoed.
Let's take a couple comments here and we'll get into them. Connor says, you think that they maybe fired David Bell when they did to get an extra look on Freddie Benavides. I don't think that per se, but firing Bell still doesn't make sense to me timing wise. Follow that up with this from John. They aren't going to announce a hire now. Major League Baseball wants attention on the playoffs. The Reds will wait until November to announce, even if they have hired. I don't agree with the second part of that, and I don't agree with the first part of that. I don't think this was about getting a look at Benavides. I think that they are
That's
in fact
5 games
going.
Gonna tell you.
Yeah, I think this is in fact them trying to get somebody hired quickly. And Major League Baseball prevents you from announcing, if I remember this correctly, Major League Baseball's rules in the postseason prevent teams from making announcements during a series, but there's gaps between series. So there's gaps in the rounds, and teams can make announcements between rounds. And then you get to the World Series and there's a freeze on news until after the World Series is over. I would suspect if the Reds, I don't know that they're going to be able to have somebody in place and be able to announce a hiring this week. But between rounds, as we head into the divisional series, I could see them make an announcement before they head to the league championship series. They could make an announcement. I think the idea is that they want to definitely get somebody in place so that when free agency opens up, when they can start talking to players, they can hit the ground running. That's what I think this was about. So I expect there to be an announcement before the World Series of who the next manager of the Cincinnati Reds is.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I was listening to one of my favorite radio personalities the other day, Scott Sloan. He was talking about it. He's like, it really seems like if you line up the timing of this, they were waiting until it was mathematically impossible for them to have a winning season. And if that's the case, if you know, above 500 or not above 500, if that was the dividing line, that's really strange, because if they knew they were going to do this, why not do it earlier? And if they had just come to that decision because they weren't going to be 500, why not let them manage out the last 5 games of the season? And I especially fall back on the quote that I just read. The fact that they said, yeah, once we get back on Monday, we'll get things set up. It was like, you just told us on Monday that you were going to be interviewing people during the road trip. Sounds like that hasn't happened. And he did say it's difficult and all this other stuff, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel I agree with the first part of that it's strange timing, because it sounds like they're just going to roll with, we were waiting for the regular season to end to start talking to people anyway.
This from another Jeff. Jeff says, Santander not worth the money he'll want. This is going to be one of the things I harp on all offseason, Jeff. And let's just start right now. I don't care what he costs. He costs what he costs. Baseball money is not reality. None of it is reality. You can't look at it and be like, this player costs too much money. He's asking for too much. He costs what he costs, and somebody's going to pay it or they're not. And if Santander goes into opening day without a job, I will be shocked. Somebody's going to pay him what he wants. Why not the Reds? They can afford it no matter what they tell you. The Bally Sports, we didn't address that back in that earlier question. I think that was Carrie. The Bally Sports, at least for Cincinnati's deal, is fairly solid right now. The Reds own 60% of Bally Sports Ohio. So they're going to make sure they pay themselves unless there's just absolutely no dollars available.
High quality programming on that channel too.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they've got the market cornered on the Reds games, and people want to watch the Reds games. So there's going to be some money there. The Reds are going to get their cut of it, and Major League Baseball is eventually going to overhaul how we get our baseball content. That's not going to be this year. I'm not worried about Bally Sports. I'm not worried about how much money Phil Castellini and Bob Castellini have. The Reds can afford to go get a big free agent. There's no doubt in my mind. You talked about the numbers, Jeff. League average payroll around $150 million. The Reds are at $70 million. Those costs are covered from the national TV deals. Those costs are covered before they ever play a baseball game, before you ever buy a ticket, before Jeff ever eats 10 pounds of fry box. Those costs are covered. So all of that other money is extra fluff money. The payroll is already covered. Stop buying into the narrative that these owners are poor. They're not poor. They have the money.
But Steve, you know, they do run it as a nonprofit. So
I am going to log you off. I'm going to knock you out of this show.
Well, you almost did earlier in the show with the electric. No, I'm just kidding. That's Helene. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. There's no such thing. Like, If we're talking about winning at the end of the season, which we won't know that in December, but if we're talking about winning at the end of the season, I don't care how much he makes. Like, give us some playoffs, give us maybe a playoff advancement. That'd be kind of nice. Like, I'll start with that. I would love a World Series, obviously, but let's just advance in the postseason for the first time in 30 years. Like, can we do that? That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I am not going to sit here and be like, boy, they spent too much money. How dare they spend that much money? Like, is Shohei Ohtani overpaid? Is Bryce Harper overpaid? You can make the argument that maybe Mike Trout is because he keeps getting hurt, but that's the dividing line. Like, are you healthy? It's really hard for me to tell you that you're overpaid if you're healthy.
Michael Blackman says the Reds need to hire a manager soon to give me time to work on the impression, and you better believe that I will be working on that impression. This is a great quote. This is a great comment rather. Since 2014, Cleveland has won their division 5 times. Same type of market. What are they doing? Jeff, they're running a variation of the Tampa model up there in Cleveland. Do I have that right? Like, they're not afraid to trade away guys and hurt some people's feelings in order to churn the roster and bring in talent.
They do, because their payroll this season is actually comparable to the Reds' payroll. The difference is they have let their baseball for a very long time now. Owners do not meddle there. They do give them a budget and then they let them go. And they have run their organization super well. Their farm system is still very highly rated and very well regarded and things like that. That's another thing that we haven't really discussed that much here recently, is that the Reds farm system, at least according to other farm systems, has really fallen back in the rankings. They're back in the 20s now. And while you can make the argument that, yeah, prospect rankings and blah, 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 it just goes to show you, if a team is worried about drafting and developing, but their development is not highly thought of amongst other teams in the league, then that's kind of tough, because where else are you going to go for that talent?
Where are you going to go, huh? Is that what we're doing? And on that bombshell, I think that is probably a good place to go ahead and wrap this up. That's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast, folks. This is the last of the regular season podcast for this year, unless something wild happens over the weekend. We'll obviously
that
be
means
back
for next Friday.
Yeah, we'll obviously be back in your feeds if they do something big, like hire a manager this weekend or something. But other than that, we'll be back with you on Monday as first of our offseason episodes. Offseason mode means we're going to be breaking down this team. We'll be breaking down 2024. We'll be looking towards 2025. We're going to get back to our Aloha Friday editions of the show as much as we can. We'll be kicking it back a little bit more relaxed atmosphere. We'll kind of just meander wherever the chat room takes us. So if you want to be part of that, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. Click that notification bell, click the like button, get us in your audio feeds as well, so you never miss out. And with that being said, Jeff, wrap us up for the final regular season time of 2024.
Thanks for always making Locked On Reds your first listen every single day. Now check out Locked On MLB. Got the link to that in the description of today's episode, as Sully is going to get you ready for the playoffs. I also know, quick other plug too, he's been filling in over on Locked On A's. He did a lot of great stuff. He actually got to attend the final game at Oakland Coliseum and had a lot of great content on that. So check out Locked On A's as well for everything about that silly story. I tell you what, that's just horrible. But Sully's got more about that there for you on Locked On A's. But
if you're mad about the Reds ownership, it could always be worse.
It could always be a lot worse. Like a lot. Like I don't even think we truly understand how worse that is. But yeah. Yes, exactly. Anyway, on a high note, we are going to be all over this off season every single possible day. Make sure that you subscribe, because Steve and I will be Locked On Reds every single day.